Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. Couldn't arrange for Shaka Khan to sing the national anthem like the NBA All-Star game this morning, so the Pledge of Allegiance we'll have to do. Can we please rise for it?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Director Andalcio? Here. Director Carey? Here. Director Colson? Here. Director Frega? Director Fuentes? Director Groven?
Here.
Director Higgins?
Here.
Director Holt? Here. Director Cotel?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Here.
Director Pang? Director Ross?
Here.
Director Sager?
Here.
Director Troiani?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Here.
We have a quorum of 15 present with 1 absent.
Excellent, thank you. The first item for our activity today is item 3A. That's the approval of the board minutes from the meeting held on December 19th, 2019, right here in this room. Any questions or comments on that? If not, can I have a motion and a second? Director Andalcio moves that we approve the minutes of December 19th, 2019, seconded by Director Cotel. Audrey, why don't you take a roll call so we've got a baseline roll call, if you would, please.
Okay. Director Andalcio? Aye. Director Carey? Aye. Director Colson?
Yes.
Director Frega? Aye. Director Fuentes? Aye. Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Higgins?
Aye.
Director Holt? Aye. Director Cotel?
Aye.
Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director Melvin?
Aye.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sager?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Yes.
15 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. The next item is the public comment segment of the meeting. We have a couple of speakers today, so if you signed in before the meeting, we've got the list up here. You'll have an opportunity to speak, and when I call your name, step up to the podium, state your name and your affiliation, and you're allowed 3 minutes. At the 2-minute point, the secretary will advise you you have a minute left, and then we'll go on to the next speaker. The first person to speak, no stranger to us, is Garland Armstrong. Garland, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard and directors. Good morning, everybody. Happy belated New Year to you. Just want you to know that me and my wife was out at the Pace headquarters and we saw the new buses that they're going to have for the West Division garage, and it is definitely unbelievable that they finally, long overdue to get that bus for the West Division garage, because every time when me and my wife sometimes go take the buses out of the West Division, their buses feel like it's wearing and tearing apart. So it is finally long overdue. And sometimes they have to borrow the current buses, like from the Northwest Division garage, to use it for their parts, for their routes. But they finally going to get some new buses that they need for their garages, because the current one they got is almost going to be worn out. So I'm finally glad Pace is finally up to it, and it's long overdue for them, what they deserve.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And the countdown is this coming Sunday. You know what it is.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Our next public comment speaker is Donna Shaw from Access Living. No?
She just signed in.
Just signed in? Great.
If you write it down, Donna.
No, she doesn't want to do it.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Okay?
You'll call your name.
Heather, come on up. Heather Armstrong. And tell Donna we appreciate her being here, will you please?
Yeah, they appreciate you being here. Okay, my concern is about funding, because like with the sales tax dropping, because people are shopping online, is there a way that you can make all of these retailers pay like taxes into the RTA. I know Amazon's the only one that I know of that you have to pay taxes from, because they the ones that charge me like the Cook County taxes. And like that's the main problem is people are shopping online to Amazon, Groupon, Wayfair, etc., etc. And this is the reason why like our malls are closing, because I think the next one's going to be a dead mall is Golf Mill, and I know one is already dead is the one in Bloomingdale, Square for Square, because all their shops are basically gone except for Macy's. And the only thing people leave a shop in the store for anymore is food.
We've worked extensively with the Illinois Department of Revenue. The service boards obviously are concerned with this as well. And we clearly are looking at what court decisions are out there, but we're working with the Illinois Department of Revenue. And I saw Mayor Lightfoot yesterday on an analogous note, clearly wants the city of Chicago to crack down on people that order liquor as well as water from some of these sites to make sure that the taxes from online sales of those two products are collected. So we're all over this, not only for fairness for our Main Street brick and mortar retailers who have to collect and pay it, but also just to make sure folks pay what under law they're expected to pay. So we are all over this because obviously, as you can tell from the charts from B and others, we watch our revenue sources very, very, very closely.
Mm-hmm.
We're on it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Next is item 5, the Executive Director's Report. Leanne.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Jill's going to be my slide mover, so I can just, I guess, stay put, be lazy. So as she's bringing that up, through the end of January, the state owes, so it's really only 1 month, right? The state owes us $235.4 million in the combination of ASA, AFA, and PTF funding. They're about 7 months behind on both the ASA and the AFA reimbursements to us, and the equivalent of about 4.8 months behind on the Public Transportation Fund reimbursement. The year-to-date cost, again, noting it's only covering through January, is $452,000. Just as a note, closing out at the end of 2019, the year-to-date cost for the short-term debt that we float for these delays and shortfalls was $5.2 million. So even though the state has sort of caught up a lot, they still are behind. We're still carrying debt, short-term debt, to float those dollars. So, sorry, I'm clicking on the mic instead of clicking down slides. Sorry. On the government affairs side of things, I'll start on the federal side. In DC, the House majority introduced a framework for a 5-year, $760 billion infrastructure proposal. The surface transportation piece of that totaled $434 billion over 5 years. There's a lot of details that still have to be worked out, and actual drafting of legislation, for example. Even more importantly, the funding mechanism to pay for any proposal still has to be worked out and negotiated. Additionally, but as you know, all these things kind of happen over the course of, before we get to any final piece of legislation. On February 10, the president's budget was released. That included a $1 trillion infrastructure proposal over a 10-year window. Again, no information about how that would actually be funded and supported. Turning to the state side, just yesterday, Governor Pritzker gave his second state budget address in front of the joint session in Springfield. Jeremy was down in Springfield the past couple of days. Government Affairs has provided you a legislative update, which is at your places with a bit more information. But I think the most important takeaway is that
Essentially, a lot of stuff is tied to or contingent upon the passing of the graduated income tax. And in our space, what the governor had announced that if the graduated income tax passes, he would reduce I think all of you know that we're been getting a 5% haircut on our public transportation fund reimbursement from the state. If the graduated income tax passes, that will be reduced down to 2.5%. So not eliminating it completely, but a half reduction. He's not just singling out the transit space, he's made sort of similar contingencies across all programs and all areas across the state budget. So, and we'll keep you informed of that progress and the development of the state budget as that continues through the rest of this spring session. So usually when it's my first ED report, it's sort of hard to, Happy New Year, I guess, because it's the first time we've all been together since the end of last year. I usually spend a little bit of time looking back on the previous year. But since you've already heard actually several presentations from staff between B and the financial closeout of 19, Jessica on the progress towards the strategic plan, and our quarterly sort of financial and reporting updates, performance updates, I thought it would be better for me to just spend a few minutes focusing on the year ahead and looking at 2020 and what our goals are. So you've got some great documents, some great presentations, and some takeaways with you today. But looking forward, I think it's important to just remind the board that every year the RTA staff and all of us put together a very detailed work plan that looks at sort of focusing our staff and our roles in their day-to-day work activities. And all staff contribute to that. It's not just a top-down effort. It's actually very much a bottom-up effort, if you will. But additionally, in the fall, our senior team met to develop our overarching goals for 2020, and they're really meant to provide a broader direction for the RTA and really a document to sort of accompany and support the work plan overall. In other words, we look at it as sort of the reasons why we're doing the work we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. You should have a hard copy of the RTA goals at your place as well. It looks like this, and I would encourage you to spend a couple of minutes after the meeting perhaps having a look through that. I just wanted to highlight that while there's both internal-facing and external-facing goals, I did want to just highlight two of our more external-facing goals because I think they're probably of more interest and perhaps more relevant to you as a board and sort of the engagement we have with you today. But before I do that, I want to cover kind of the overall themes of our 2020 goals. The agency's sort of holistic approach for this year. So with the introduction of the goals, the document states that we are coming off a very pivotal year, and we've talked about this a lot, in which advocacy by our agency, its partners, and our stakeholders really helped to bring about the most significant capital program that this state has seen ever. And it really was that step forward really couldn't have happened without having the foundation and the regional consensus that was built out of the strategic plan that you adopted back in 2018. That was really the guiding principles that we used to make that case to Springfield and others for our funding needs. Just as last year built on the prior year's successes, we're defining 2020 goals that will continue to setting the stage for progress, not just for 2020, but for the years to come. So we want to focus intently on implementing the Invest in Transit strategies through our work plan. The presentations you heard earlier highlighted a lot of that work and the goals, but I think we're really on track, but a lot remains to be done over the next several years. Staff should remain mindful of how organizationally and as individually we can add value to the region as a whole. For every activity, we need to identify and continuously consider the relevant constituencies and the stakeholders that we have. This requires introspection about the RTA's regional role, and we must keep transparency and accountability at its core. We should also work to leverage your relationships and your strengths, the RTA board. And candidly, it's your appointing authorities that are among some of our key audiences and our most effective amplifiers of the broader messages that we continue to talk about. Although the service boards are forever central to our mission, our audiences are increasingly broad and diverse. We should consistently engage other partners and stakeholders whose support is integral in achieving these strategic goals. And I think you saw some of that playing out in some of the work that the conversations we've been having with some of the civic groups around the region. Our overall theme is to create a modern, just-in-time mechanisms for reaching out to these constituencies with informative and persuasive content. This overall section really helps frame how we approach our work in the coming years. So now, as I said, I'd like to just touch on a couple of our external facing goals. I'm not going to go through these in great length, but hit on a few high points. So we believe that transparency and accountability are critical as we program and administer the funds provided to us by Rebuild Illinois. As the largest state capital program in our state's history, it offers us maybe a once-in-a-generation opportunity to invest in our transit system. And we must do this in a way that is consistent with the guiding principles that we agreed on with our service boards, and in a way that addresses not only priority projects listed in the strategic plan, but also really helps us address the regional backlog. We'll look to streamline the administrative processes between the agencies so that our region receives funds and implements projects in an expeditious way. Since the adoption of the 5-year program in December, we've made some really good progress on implementing Rebuild Illinois, a lot of which has sort of been behind the scenes. We've been working closely with the service boards and IDOT to identify a number of administrative processes that can streamline our work and create efficiencies and eliminate unnecessary burdens across all parties. Additionally, we have worked towards getting more than a third of the projects underway in grant agreements, which is a great step forward in implementing this goal. So right now, there's about 30 projects that are already in various stages of grant development and implementation to really get the service boards running quickly in delivering these projects. Additionally, on the PAYGO side, so that's focused on the bond dollars. Those grants are focused on the state bond dollars, and the state's already issued some of those bonds. On the PAYGO side, though, we're still having a couple of challenges. We alluded to this a little bit earlier. Those monies aren't flowing just yet. We're working with IDOT in a very constructive way. We actually, all 4 agencies sat down with IDOT and the secretary just this past Wednesday, to continue the conversation about this. But we're having conversations about the process by which those dollars will flow to us, as well as the eligibility of what projects can be funded through those PAYGO dollars. Different conversations, different perspectives on some of that, and we're working through it. The money's not going away. It is just sitting there and being collected. But we hope to make some good progress on this over the next coming months. We're working through this on an administrative way at this point. But, we have already begun conversation about there might need to be some legislative tweaks that might have to pass in this current session to clean up some language. Many of you probably understand that when often they write legislative language, it's open to interpretation, and maybe parties have different opinions on things. So we've already begun sort of that parallel conversation about maybe having to make some legislative tweaks on some of this. But I will say it's a very constructive conversation with all parties involved, including the service boards, with all of us at the table working through these issues. Additionally, we're going to create a regional programming process that will determine the future capital allocations by establishing performance-based allocations committee. You heard from the civic groups that came before us in December last year, November and December. We have already formed and convened a committee. We met just a couple of weeks ago. We have also had, and we will continue to meet every month, and our intention is to have a proposal to you by July, available for public comment and available to you on how we will proceed to allocate those dollars going forward in the future. For guidance on how we will allocate those dollars. Additionally, we've had several conversations with the civic groups to continue to keep them informed and getting their input as we're developing that process as we go forward. Our final goal on the capital side is to monitor and report the spend down on capital funds and the rate of spending and unspent dollars that will be considered in future budget cycles. You've heard about this earlier in Jessica's report, and we'll continue to be, we keep saying, we want to be open and transparent in both our reporting and our accountability as we move forward over the coming years. So turning to the other key external kind of facing goal, and that's on the legislative side. Of course, our legislative goals overlap very much within with our capital work as well as our communication efforts, but just want to touch on a few points. We want to focus on the restoration of the state budget cuts, specifically on the operating side. We've talked about this at length. It's important that we do this and make sure that we have supportable and transparent data to make strong cases to legislators, because I think many times they don't understand, they'll recognize that they just passed this massive capital program and forget that they've actually been on the same point cutting us on the operating side. How can we work with them to help them understand what the impacts of those are? We'll also advocate for improvement of the current state capital allocation process through state legislation or administrative action. We want to ensure that Rebuild Illinois funds reach their intended project destinations as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We also want to keep an eye and turn our eyes this coming year to Washington, D.C., even and perhaps especially in this election year. Federal funding continues to be an important piece of our region's dollars, and we will actively and aggressively track all movement on the federal reauthorization bill, which is set to expire September 30 this year, so we are very actively engaged in those conversations. Last year, the RTA customer service team also serviced 357,000 reduced fare and free ride customers. And we're going to continue to examine all legislative and administrative avenues to enhance those programs as we look through the rest of this legislative season. So before I conclude this presentation and answer any questions that you might have, I wanted to just make a quick note on an impending internal change that we're having at the RTA. I think you might have seen an email, but just in case you didn't, later this month, Julia Patterson, our long-term standing HR director, is retiring from the RTA. She has worked for RTA for 23 years. In fact, she and her team have hired pretty much all the RTA staff, sans a few, that have been here a little longer than the 23-year period. So they're big shoes to fill. She will be sorely missed. I know several of you have had interactions with her over the years. She's not here today. She was actually out sick, and I'm not sure if she's still out sick today or she's in ERP training as we're implementing our new financial implementation system. She's working to transition with that. But we're sad to see her go, but happy to send her off on a fond farewell as she moves into the next phase of her adventures, and that's travel the world, as when she has some pretty big plans right now in her retirement. Additionally, related to that, I want to let you know that Allison Novak, who is currently our Deputy General Counsel, will be stepping into the role of Acting Human Resources Director in these interim months. While we work out the plan going forward and look to potentially hire into some positions in that group. So with that, some congratulations to Allison and thanks to the rest of the legal team who are going to have to sort of shift and support around all those competing issues and opportunities and needs. So with that, I will stop and engage and answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, Director Carey.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, going to the new money from the state, to confirm there's 30 capital projects in process using some of those the bond money.
I think it's about a third of the entire program that is already kind of in the works.
Great.
So to give you a perspective, yeah.
Okay, great. On the pay-go, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but when you start talking about legislative changes, it sounds like this could drag out for some time.
I don't want that to sound like that. I think two ways to think about this. We are working through it administratively. But it is a new pot of money that's coming to our region, and we would prefer, in a way, to set it up right. And that's not just us in the transit space, but that's IDOT as well. While we're pursuing it administratively, I think there's maybe some growing interest or realization that we might need to clean things up so it's as crystal clear as possible going forward. Realistically, I know people are sort of championing a bit to get those dollars and get them spending. There's a lot of internal work to do, even both on the service board sides, going from sort of having no capital program or very small capital programs for the last 10 years to a massive capital program. So I want to put it in a bit of perspective that we're not really losing a huge amount of ground. The monies are staying there, they're not going anywhere, they're available to be tapped. And even working through some of these administrative changes and getting those dollars flowing is probably going to take another couple of months anyway. The legislative session ends in May, so the timing isn't that crazy. I don't anticipate there's a lot of interest in clarifying all of this, so it's not like we're fighting with different factions about how this plays out. So if anything was to have to be pursued legislatively, I think my at least assumption at this point is that it would be a joint effort with us and IDOT going forward, but us and the state going forward on that. So I don't know, Jeremy or Jill, if you want to add anything, but I think that's kind of,
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Leanne. Item 6 is the approval of consent items as they appear on the board agenda. 6A is the resolutions certifying the financial results for the fourth quarter of 2019. Any questions on that weren't asked in committee? If not, can I have a motion and a second on certifying the financial results? Director Melvin moves that we adopt 6A, seconded by Dr. Sager. Is there leave for the attendance roll call on this? Seeing no objection, leave is granted.
15 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Secretary. On item 7, that's the approval of these are the approval of contract and expenditure items as they appear on the board agenda. The items for consideration are 3. The first 2 we will separate out as separate roll calls because I believe there's a director that needs to vote present. So 7A is the ordinance authorizing a contract for human services transportation program, the HSTP program. Any questions on that? If not, can I have a motion to accept this one? Director Lewis moves that 7A be approved, seconded by Director Groven. On that, Audrey, let's take a roll call.
Director Indalcio, Director Carey, Director Colson, Director Frega, Director Fuentes, Director Groven, Director Higgins, Director Holt, Director Cotel, Director Lewis, Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Ross, Director Sager, Director Troiani,
Aye.
Chairman Dillard,
Yes.
15 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. On the next is, and that's adopted, 7B is the ordinance authorizing a contract amendment with CDW. And with that, Leanne, do you want George to say
yeah, I'm
something?
going to just have George make a couple of quick comments, and I believe Director Indalcio is going to recuse himself.
That is correct. I'll be abstaining this for the record, Mr. Chairman.
But several board members had some questions on this item, and just to provide some sort of clarity around what we're doing with this contract amendment, I just thought it'd be easier to have George just speak to you collectively.
Right. Thank you, Leanne. Good morning, board members. So just to kind of highlight some of the specific reasons why we want to adopt this particular contract with CDW, the City of Chicago implemented a couple of different things. Number one, they extended this contract to 2021. What that allows us to do from a technology perspective is kind of plan out more of our technology projects that we want to implement for the RTA and also develop the evaluation of new tools that the RTA can use and leverage in support of our agency. So that was one of the key things that we wanted. They extended this contract to 2021 September. The second thing that they did was they expanded the scope of the project. So again, we could look introspectively and say, hey, now that they've expanded this scope, we've got other projects that we can now put into that scope and complete those projects as well. So that was an important aspect of it to begin with. And then finally, the purchasing power of the City of Chicago. Obviously, as an agency, we're small. The City of Chicago is much larger. They have the purchasing power and the negotiation ability to get products and services at a much cheaper cost. Now, as an example of that, most of us may have heard, and maybe you haven't, of firewalls. Firewalls are specific devices that sit on a network that protect it from intrusion. These are typically deployed in pairs, primary and then a secondary. And we don't want to get into all the technical stuff about how these things work, but they're expensive. And they're deployed in pairs, and they cost anywhere from $150,000 to $800,000 when you include the support and maintenance, and then the follow-on implementation. So if we had to go out to market for these things with, let's say, an RFP or even an IFB, an invitation for bid, it would cost us a lot more than what the City of Chicago has already negotiated in their particular contract, so with CDW. So that's why one of the driving reasons that we want to participate and piggyback on this contract is because of that purchasing power and the leverage that we can get, not having to go out to market for these expensive items, but having the negotiation essentially already done for us. There are M, W, and DBE specifications in this contract, and we fully expect that CDW will be in compliance with those. We have reached out to CDW for the numbers of what that would look like with our implementation, but we don't have those yet. We'll provide those if it's necessary. But those are the main reasons why we wanted to piggyback off this contract. So if there are any other specific questions related to the contract or some of the technology that we're implementing, I'd be happy to answer those.
Director Ross.
I still have one question, I guess. I'm not sure how much of this is what you might call consulting services versus the purchase of product. I'm still not clear on that even after your explanation.
Okay, so the consulting services would be like the implementation, how much it costs for CDW to help us implement that. It's typically about 4 to 6% of the total cost of a particular project for them to help us implement these products. So right now we're implementing domain controllers. These are just large computers that manage the database of all the users, all the users in the RTA. And the implementation cost for that is going to be about $30,000 for them to help us do that.
And George, just to highlight too, that you mentioned the firewalls. We're actually looking to upgrade our firewalls because
Correct.
ours are essentially at the end of their life, and that's almost the additional cost of this the additional amendment cost that we're adding to this contract is almost 2/3 of that dollar amount, I believe it was.
That's
wasn't it?
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
The physical product of firewalls.
Yeah, so these firewalls, like I mentioned, we have to purchase 2. Ours are currently end of life, and certainly this is something that we don't want to risk not being able to implement in an appropriate manner. Because we don't have our IT department is relatively small, and we don't have the core expertise, we bring CDW, our vendor, in to help us implement those things.
Director Lewis.
George, we've put a lot of emphasis on working with MBEs and WBEs in this negotiation with yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
CDW.
If they're not able to satisfy our standard, what is our next step?
I believe they are supposed to be in compliance. I'm not really sure what the next step is.
So they're still contractually bound to meet all of the M and WBE goals that are on the original competitively bid city contract. The penalties are the same as they would be with any other contract if they didn't meet those goals or give us good faith efforts why they didn't meet those goals. We could terminate the contract, we could hold them in default, we could put a stop work order on the contract until they become compliant. All the usual mechanisms that we use in order to keep people compliant with those requirements.
Have they been meeting the standards historically? Are they on the low side, middle side, or
To
high
my
side?
understanding, the spend thus far has been very low. I don't know where we are with it, but I don't think we've spent very much money on this contract yet, but about 80,000. So I don't know where we are with the DBE spend on that, but that's a relatively small amount of
But we'll
spend.
encourage them to try and be as inclusive as possible in our
Of course, we're
conversation.
going to insist on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director
Any other
Carey.
questions?
On the additional services that we're going to get under the CDW contract now through Chicago, which is great. I mean, it's great to be able to piggyback on that. I'm sure the prices are much better. But are these services that were being done by some other contractor? Were we doing, some other service? Were there some of it being done in-house? I understand the firewalls you're purchasing is this all new?
Yeah, this is basically all new. So a lot of the equipment that we've done the inventory on is either at end of life or near end of life. So we're basically now kind of overhauling all of our back-end infrastructure to include servers, to include software, and then, of course, the services, the support and maintenance that come along with that. And that's usually a specific percentage. I don't have that off the top of my head, but anytime you implement any of these new devices, you have to have that support and maintenance for X number of years to go along with that. In the event that something happens and goes wrong, you mitigate that risk by having the ability to go out to the vendor or the manufacturer and say, hey, give us a hand on how to fix this particular problem that we've encountered. So this is a lot of new initiatives that we're putting forth just to make sure that the RTA over the next 5 to 6 years has the proper infrastructure in place.
Okay, so the additional 500,000 is in the budget for this year?
Yes.
And so at the time we did the budget last year, we were assuming we would get this under the CDW contract? Which has been
Yes.
in the works for a while?
Yes.
Yeah, we've been negotiating this for a couple of months,
Yeah.
tied to the city's contract renegotiation. So yes, it is put in the budget. It was contemplated to be having
Okay.
these expenses for this coming year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Other questions? Dr. Higgins.
Are there other significant spend items coming out of the security risk analysis that you oversaw in the last year and a half or so that have not been realized yet?
No. So we are currently, we've executed the cybersecurity contract that is basically pushing our new security initiative with new policies for security. Obviously, the firewalls kind of fall under that from an academic standpoint. And that has already been taken care of in last year's budget. But the actual work started in January of this year. So we've executed that contract. We're moving forward. We have our consultant on site a couple of times a week with our cybersecurity initiative. And we really hope to be kind of the COE, the Center of Excellence, to the service boards. I had Harry Kamer from Metro reached out to me last week and asked how we were doing with that. So once we get that implemented, we're really hoping that the service boards will see the initiative that we put forth with the cybersecurity and hopefully follow on with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The other nice thing about CDW is they're local. Fortune 500 company, but they're local, and they're also very good at what they do. But they're local, which helps. All right, with that, how about a motion? Director Ross moves that 7B be approved, seconded by Director Holt. And with that, Audrey, please take a roll call.
Okay. Director Andalcio? Director Carey? Director Colson? Director Frega? Director Fuentes? Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Higgins?
Aye.
Director Holt? Director Cotel? Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Ross? Director Sager?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Aye.
Chairman Dillard?
Aye.
14 ayes, 1 absent, and 1 abstention.
Great, thank you, and that is so approved. The next item is 7C, which are travel expense reimbursement for staff and board members. Any questions on that? If not, can I have a motion and a second? Director Carey moves that we approve 7C, seconded by Director Groven. On this one, I think we can, is there leave for the attendance roll call?
Leave.
Seeing no objection, leave is granted and 7C is adopted.
15 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before us today for discussion? Seeing none, let me remind you that our next scheduled meeting for the RTA board and our committee meetings will take place right here at CMAP in the Willis Tower, beginning with committees at 9, followed by the board meeting on March 19th. So it's hard to believe we're almost in the spring, but we are. Any other business to come before the RTA this morning? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and Director Andalcio moves we adjourn, seconded by Director Higgins. With that, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Doug Triani.